She was just another nurse on the night shift, clock in, clock out, clean sheets, empty rooms, fading hope. Until she was assigned him. Logan Wexler. Billionaire tech mogul. Comatose for over a year after a mysterious car crash that made headlines and then quietly disappeared from them. No visitors. No family. Just machines keeping him alive and a city that had already moved on. But Brooklyn James didn't. Every night, she bathed him. Not out of duty, but something deeper. She told him stories. Laughed. Sang. And one morning, when her fingers brushed his wrist, his hand moved. At first, she thought she imagined it. But then, he whispered her name. And just like that, everything changed. Because Logan didn't remember his life. Not the empire. Not the crash. But somehow, he remembered her. And when Brooklyn began digging into what really happened that night, what she uncovered would lead to betrayal, a $1 million murder plot, and a truth no one was supposed to find. He was never supposed to wake up. And she? She was never supposed to matter. But love doesn't ask permission. It rewrites everything. Even fate. Brooklyn James wasn't supposed to be anyone special. She clocked in at 7 p.m. sharp, 6 nights a week, wore the same navy scrubs, tied her curls into the same rushed ponytail, and kept her head down. She wasn't one of those nurses who made small talk with doctors or snuck out early if the floor was slow. She was the one you called when a patient coded at 3 a.m. and the other nurses panicked. But even Brooklyn had her limits. By year 3 at Lenox Hill Medical Center, the fluorescent lights felt like a second sun. The halls smelled like bleach and burnout. The human stories, the heartbreaking ones, the miraculous ones, had started to feel distant. Routine. She was tired. Jaded. Stuck. Then came the call to the 10th floor. The VIP suite. No one got assigned to the 10th floor unless they were handpicked. The patients weren't just sick, they were powerful, connected, or rich enough to pay for silence. Most nurses hated it. Too many egos. Too many eyes watching. Brooklyn just shrugged. Another room, another chart, another lonely body. She didn't expect him. The name on the door stopped her. Logan Wexler. She froze. Even in her exhausted fog, she knew that name. The Logan Wexler. The 34-year-old tech prodigy who built an AI empire out of a Brooklyn apartment and took his company public before he turned 30. Forbes called him the next Steve Jobs. Wired called him a ghost with a god complex. Women called him everything in between. And now, he was in a coma. Brooklyn's hand hovered on the door handle. The whispers came back to her. A crash in the Hudson Valley. Rain, speed, something about brake failure. The car totaled. Logan Wexler had vanished from the headlines nearly a year ago. No statements. No updates. Some people even assumed he was dead. But he wasn't. He was lying inside this luxury hospital suite, alive, hooked up to machines, kept on life support and silence that cost $40,000 a week. Brooklyn stepped in. The room was dim and sterile but strangely beautiful. Crown molding. Dark oak furniture. A massive wall of windows overlooking Manhattan's midnight skyline. It didn't feel like a hospital room, it felt like a mausoleum for the living. And in the center of it all was him. Logan. She had seen pictures before, on magazine covers, tech expos, Twitter memes, but nothing prepared her for seeing him like this. Still. Pale. A tangle of wires and tubes. A shadow of a man who once commanded boardrooms, patents, headlines. He looked like a statue carved in regret. But Brooklyn wasn't the type to be starstruck. She approached like she would any patient, check vitals, adjust monitors, change linens, clean the body, speak gently, even if no one ever answered back. Except that first night, something felt different. As she pressed a warm cloth to his chest, something flickered beneath his skin. Not movement, more like a presence. As if, somewhere deep beneath that broken shell, someone was watching her. Feeling her. Listening. She brushed it off. Nerves. Imagination. Maybe the long shifts were finally catching up with her. But then it happened again. And again. She started talking to him during baths. Small things, harmless things. "The coffee here's still trash," she whispered one night. "You'd think for 40 grand a week, they'd spring for oat milk." No response. But she kept going. She told him about patients who made her laugh. About her dream of leaving New York. About the nurse manager who wore too much cologne and hit on anything with a pulse. And slowly, as the nights passed, her tone changed. She started waiting for him to answer. She started hoping. Brooklyn didn't know why she cared so much. Maybe it was the stillness in his face, the way it looked like he wasn't gone, just waiting. Maybe it was because he was the only one who didn't talk back, who couldn't judge or interrupt or walk away. Or maybe it was something else. Something she didn't want to admit. He was beautiful. Not in a polished, billionaire playboy way. But in the way a sculpture was beautiful. Chiseled. Tragic. Suspended in a moment of pain. And somewhere between night 6 and night 16, Brooklyn James stopped seeing him as a task and started seeing him as a person. The doctors didn't expect movement. The neurologist, Dr. Allen, said the scans were stubborn. That's how he put it. His brain's stubborn. No signs of progress in months. But Brooklyn noticed things. A twitch in his finger. A shift in his brow. The faintest pressure against her wrist. The kind of things a machine wouldn't catch, but a human heart would. Still, she said nothing. Until the morning his hand closed around hers. It was gentle. Weak. Like a whisper made of skin. But it was real. Her breath caught. She looked down. His fingers were wrapped around hers. Brooklyn screamed. The basin crashed to the floor. The emergency button lit the room in red. Doctors and nurses stormed in, barking orders. And Logan Wexler opened his eyes. After 13 silent months, he spoke. One word. Her name. Brooklyn. Logan's eyes didn't stay open long that first time. Maybe 20 seconds. Maybe less. But in those 20 seconds, everything changed. For weeks after that, the doctors played catch-up, scans, neurological tests, muscle response evaluations. They threw around cautious words like flickers of consciousness and partial emergence. But Brooklyn wasn't listening to medical jargon anymore. She had seen the way his eyes found hers. Not wandering. Not random. Hers. And every day, she sat by his side, waiting. Hoping. Speaking, even when he couldn't. Didn't think I'd have to start entertaining billionaires for a living, she said one afternoon, perched on the edge of his bed, peeling a clementine. But here we are. You missed the worst lasagna in the cafeteria today. Consider yourself lucky. Stillness. But something about the silence now felt different. Expectant, almost. Like the air was holding its breath with her. So she kept talking. About growing up in Queens. About her grandma's soup that could cure anything except broken hearts. About how she wanted to be a painter once, before life got messy and hospitals became home. You know, she said, adjusting his 4-1 night, I used to think saving lives meant sirens and scalpels. Turns out, it's quieter than that. It's wiping drool and keeping someone company when the rest of the world forgets they exist. His heart monitor pulsed, steady. but she could have sworn it quickened whenever she touched his hand. It became their ritual. Every day, she spoke. Every day, he lay still. But little by little, something inside him shifted. First, it was a blink. Then, a twitch of his hand when she laughed. Then came the day she made a joke, something stupid about hospital food, and his lips curled. Not a full smile, but the ghost of one. She stared at him. "You heard me, didn't you?" Silence. But his eyebrow arched, just enough. "Okay, Mr. Wexler," she said, eyes narrowing playfully. "You're in there somewhere, and now I've got proof." From that moment on, it became a two-way street. Brooklyn spoke to reach him. And he, imperfectly, subtly, responded. His hand would tighten when she told a sad story. His jaw would twitch when she mentioned something unfair or frustrating. And on quiet nights, when the wind rattled the hospital windows and she whispered, "I don't want to go home," his fingers would trace against her palm like a silent promise, "You're not alone." She didn't know how to explain it to anyone. To the outside world, Logan Wexler was still the coma patient. Still the headline. Still the billionaire in limbo. But to Brooklyn, he was awake. Not fully, not clinically, but spiritually. Emotionally. He was listening. He was learning her voice. Her patterns. Her presence. She could feel it every time she walked into the room. And it wasn't just her imagination. Dr. Allen, who once called her overly hopeful, started keeping Logan's chart open longer. Neurologists began visiting more frequently. Nurses started whispering about the girl who made the billionaire blink. But Brooklyn didn't care about the attention. She cared about him. The way his lips moved soundlessly when she read to him. The way his eyes began to track her across the room. The way his fingers grazed hers and lingered longer every day. They had their own language now. Wordless. Fragile. But theirs. And somewhere along the line, Brooklyn realized something terrifying. She didn't just care about Logan Wexler the patient. She cared about Logan Wexler the man. Not the billionaire. Not the headline. But the man who, despite a broken body and shattered past, was still here. Still trying. Still listening to her when no one else ever really had. She couldn't explain how it happened. Love doesn't come with announcements. It sneaks in, between 4 changes and midnight whispers. Between nervous jokes and tired glances. But one night, after a particularly grueling shift, she laid her head on the edge of his bed and whispered, "Please don't leave me." And his hand moved. Up. Over. Onto her hair. It was the first deliberate movement. Small. Weak. Trembling. But deliberate. She cried for the first time in years. The next morning, Logan opened his eyes again, and this time, they stayed open longer. This time, they searched for her. And when they found her, something unspoken passed between them. Brooklyn didn't need him to speak yet. He already had. The morning it happened didn't feel special. It was cloudy. The city skyline outside the window was blanketed in gray. Brooklyn hadn't slept more than 4 hours in 2 days. She spilled coffee on her scrubs. Her name tag was crooked. Nothing about the day screamed miracle. But miracles rarely announce themselves. She entered Logan's suite with the same quiet rhythm she always did. Adjusted his monitor. Fluffed his pillow. Checked his vitals. Everything was normal. Until it wasn't. As she reached for a warm cloth to begin his morning wash, she felt it again, that strange shift in the air. The weight of being watched. She looked down. His eyes were closed, his chest rising and falling, soft and steady. She dipped the cloth into the basin, wrung it out, and gently wiped his chest. I was thinking about getting a dog, she murmured with a soft smile. Someone to talk to who won't just lie there and ignore me all day. Stillness. I'd name him Wexler. Teach him to sit, stay, and not look so damn smug. She reached for his arm, then froze. Because this time, when her fingers brushed his wrist, his hand moved. Not a twitch. Not a spasm. It tightened, gently, unmistakably, around hers. Her heart punched her ribs. Logan, she whispered. Nothing. But then, slowly, so slowly, his eyes fluttered open. Two piercing blue eyes met hers. Disoriented. Clouded. But alive. Logan, she choked, barely above a whisper, can you hear me? His lips parted. Dry. Cracked. Straining to shape something real. Brooklyn. Her knees nearly gave out. The basin slipped from her hands, water splashing across the tile, but she didn't care. She was frozen in place, staring at a miracle. He said her name. For months, she had spoken into silence. For weeks, she had prayed into stillness. Now, the man everyone gave up on had spoken her name, not nurse, not help, not even hey. Her name. The emergency alarm button lit red as her hand slammed it. Within seconds, the room flooded with white coats and chaos. Doctors barked orders. Monitors beeped. Nurses rushed forward like a wave crashing through the door. Dr. Allen reached the bed, breathless. What happened? He grabbed my hand. He opened his eyes. He spoke, Brooklyn stammered, her voice cracking between disbelief and awe. Logan blinked slowly, eyes darting around the room. Confused. Overwhelmed. But not unconscious. Not gone. The world moved in a blur. The medical team swarmed around him, checking reflexes, shining lights in his eyes, adjusting his oxygen levels. But through it all, he kept looking at her. Brooklyn stood just outside the crowd, heart racing, chest tight. She didn't speak. Didn't breathe. Just watched. And then, slowly, his gaze found her again, cutting through the noise, the bodies, the chaos, and held it. He didn't look away. And she knew. He didn't remember who he was. Didn't remember what year it was. Didn't remember the crash, the empire, the mansion on the Upper East Side. But he remembered her. Later that night, after the tests, after the charts and the questions and the second opinions, Brooklyn sat beside his bed again. Only this time, he was awake. Not fully. Not confidently. But awake. She reached for his hand, unsure. Would he remember touching her? Saying her name? Would it even matter? Logan turned his head slowly, weakly, to look at her. Do you know who I am? She asked. He frowned, his brows tightening. No, he rasped, voice raw from months of disuse. I don't remember anything. Her chest deflated, just a little. But, he added, his fingers brushing hers, I feel like I should. That was when the tears came. Not from sadness. Not from loss. But from hope. Because while the past was gone, connection had survived. Somewhere in the darkness of his coma, in the hours no one counted, in the silence no one heard, Logan Wexler had known her. Her presence. Her voice. Her heart. And that kind of knowing didn't come from memory. It came from something deeper. He didn't remember his company. Or the billions in his portfolio. Or the name of the man who tried to kill him. But somehow, his soul remembered the one person who never left his side. Brooklyn. The miracle of Logan's awakening didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning. In the days that followed, the hospital buzzed with cautious celebration. Doctors called it unprecedented recovery. Therapists used words like neuroplasticity and regenerative potential. Headlines leaked. The media wanted interviews. The Wexler name, once whispered in past tense, was back, loud and alive. But Brooklyn wasn't celebrating. Not fully. Because something didn't sit right. Logan's memories were empty. Not foggy, erased. He couldn't recall the crash. The moments before it. Even his own company felt like a stranger's invention. It was as if someone had scrubbed him clean, leaving only a body and a blank mind. And then came that night. It was 3:42 a.m. She had stayed late again, couldn't sleep, couldn't leave. Logan had drifted into a light nap after physical therapy, his head finally resting without wires or alarms. Brooklyn wandered the hallway, restless. She found herself in the hospital records room. Not because she planned to be there, but because her gut pulled her like a magnet. She typed his name, Logan James Wexler. The screen blinked. Medical records. Diagnostic reports. Emergency logs. And then, an accident reconstruction file from the night of the crash, buried deep under legal hold. She clicked. And what she saw made her blood turn cold. Brake failure, determined to be mechanical sabotage. Her eyes scanned the page again. Not worn. Not malfunction. Sabotaged. There it was in black and white, filed by the independent investigators. The hydraulic brake line had been cleanly severed, cut, not eroded. No animal involvement. No environmental cause. No system failure. Someone had done it deliberately. Brooklyn's hand trembled as she printed the report. The hum of the printer sounded like thunder in the silent room. She stood there frozen, the pages in her hand, her heart racing. Someone had tried to kill him. And if he hadn't veered off that road, if his body hadn't landed at just the right angle, if emergency responders hadn't found him when they did, he'd be dead. No coma. No awakening. Just a funeral. $1 billion empire would have been passed on. To who? That question wouldn't leave her mind. Back in Logan's room, she stared at him differently now, not with pity, not with affection, but with fierce protectiveness. Because Logan didn't know. He didn't remember the crash. He didn't know someone had tried to erase him from the world. And now that he was awake, that someone might try again. The next morning, she told him. Gently. Slowly. Sitting by his bedside with the report folded neatly in her lap. Logan, she began, voice low, I need to show you something. He looked up, blinking slowly, his muscles still recovering. Is it about the crash? She nodded, then passed the report into his shaky hands. He read slowly. Line by line. When he reached the word sabotage, his fingers clenched so hard the page crumpled. His face didn't show fear. Or confusion. It showed rage. Raw. Quiet. Cold. Someone did this, he whispered. Brooklyn nodded. Yes. He stared straight ahead, the weight of truth settling into his bones. Do you think it was random? No, she said firmly. This was personal. Precise. Someone knew where you'd be. Knew how to disable your car without triggering alarms. This wasn't random. This was calculated. He sat back in bed, processing. So while I was in a coma, someone was walking around free. Watching the news. Watching me disappear. Brooklyn reached for his hand. Not anymore. He turned to her, eyes sharp with something that hadn't been there before, clarity. Then we find out who did this, he said. And we don't stop until we know why. Brooklyn didn't hesitate. She nodded. Together, they would uncover the truth before the person who tried to kill him got another chance. They didn't go to the police, not yet. Logan insisted on waiting. If someone close to me did this, he said, I need to know it. Not guess. Not accuse. No. So, they dug. Late nights in the hospital turned into digital stakeouts. Brooklyn brought her laptop. Logan, still too weak to sit for long, lay propped up in bed, eyes scanning every email, every transaction, every corner of his digital life like a man retracing footprints in the dark. What they found wasn't obvious at first. His financial accounts were intact. His assets hadn't been touched. His business interests were operating as expected. Everything looked fine. Too fine. Until Brooklyn asked the right question. Who controlled your company while you were in a coma? Logan hesitated. Derek. Derek? She asked. My half-brother, he said quietly. Same dad, different mothers. He's CFO. Always wanted to run things, but I never thought. Brooklyn's eyes narrowed. You trusted him? I had to. Legally, he was next in line if something happened to me. And that was the crack. Brooklyn searched the business accounts for anomalies, consulting fees, insurance changes, anything that didn't make sense. It took hours. Days. Then she found it. A $7.5 million transfer. To an offshore account. Buried in the expense ledger as legal consulting, crisis contingency. Approved 3 days before the crash. Her heart sank. Logan stared at the screen. That's not a real firm. I've never seen that name in my life. She traced the receiving account through 2 holding companies. Eventually, the money landed in the hands of a known fixer, a man with a rap sheet full of staged accidents and sealed court records. Brooklyn's voice dropped. This guy's a ghost, and a professional. He's done this before. And then came the final nail. The request authorization was digitally signed by Derek Wexler. Logan didn't speak for a full minute. He just stared at the screen. His knuckles whitened around the blanket. His breath turned shallow. I gave him everything, he said quietly. When our dad died, I could have taken the whole company. I gave him stock. Power. My trust. Brooklyn sat beside him, her hand brushing his. And he used it to try and erase you. Logan didn't cry. He didn't shake. What he did was far more terrifying. He went still. Cold. Focused. Then he doesn't get to walk away from this, he said. Not after leaving me to die. Not after pretending to care for the press. Not after smiling in front of the board while I was buried in tubes. He turned to Brooklyn. We set a trap. And this time, he walks right into it. That evening, Logan made the call. His voice was steady, professional, eerily calm. Derek, he said, we need to talk. I'm back. Let's meet, just us. At the estate. Tomorrow night. Derek agreed. Of course he did. Because he didn't know Logan remembered nothing and had uncovered everything. Brooklyn could barely sleep. The air felt electric. Charged. Like standing under a thunderstorm and waiting for the first bolt to strike. The following night, they arrived at the Wexler estate. Logan walked slowly but proudly, his steps uneven, but his spine straight. The mansion loomed behind him like a monument to betrayal. Derek was already inside. Casual. Smiling. Whiskey in hand. Logan, he grinned, walking over. You look alive. Logan didn't return the smile. Surprised? Honestly? Derek shrugged. Yeah. We all thought. I know, Logan interrupted. The room went still. Brooklyn stood just behind him, unreadable. Logan stepped forward, his voice low. Let's skip the fake concern. I'm here because I remembered something. Derek stiffened. Logan placed the printed transfer record on the desk. Derek didn't move. I remembered the sound of metal tearing, Logan said. I remembered the brakes not responding. And I remembered trusting you. Derek scoffed. You think I know you did. And right on cue, the study door burst open. 2 NYPD officers entered, guns holstered, badges raised. Derek Wexler, one of them announced. You're under arrest for attempted murder and financial conspiracy to commit corporate fraud. Derek's face drained of color. You set me up, he hissed, stepping back. No, Logan said, his voice like steel. You set yourself up the moment you chose money over blood. As the cuffs clicked shut and Derek was led away, screaming hollow threats, Logan didn't even flinch. He just turned to Brooklyn, eyes softer now, heavier. It's over, he said. Not triumphant, just tired. Finally. She touched his hand. No. This is where it begins. And she meant it. The news spread like wildfire. Wexler brother arrested in attempted murder plot. Cable networks ran breaking coverage. Business blogs exploded with speculation. Former board members tripped over themselves to deny knowledge. Investors panicked, then pivoted. By sunrise, Logan Wexler's name was back in every headline, but this time, he wasn't a fallen tech icon. He was the man who survived. The man who came back. The man who fought. But the real victory wasn't in the media coverage. It was in the way he walked through the front doors of Wexler Industries 3 days later, slow, steady, cane in hand, Brooklyn beside him. The elevator to the 51st floor felt heavier than he remembered. Every ding sounded like a heartbeat. Every reflection in the polished chrome reminded him of who he used to be. And who he was now. The doors opened to the executive floor, where just a year ago, Derek had stood at that corner office window, sipping his scotch, planning his little kingdom. Now? Empty. Logan stepped inside, his breath catching slightly. Brooklyn stood behind him, watching him take it in, not just the room, but everything that had been stolen. His company. His autonomy. His identity. But not anymore. He walked to the center of the conference room, where the remaining board members sat stiffly, unsure whether to stand or apologize. He didn't wait for either. Let me be very clear, Logan said, his voice hoarse but resolute. I'm not here to be pitted. I'm not here to tell stories. I'm here because I survived an attempt on my life orchestrated by someone inside this company. And now, I'm taking it back. No one spoke. Not a breath. Not a cough. Just the weight of his words settling like stone. One board member, a woman named Clarissa, finally cleared her throat. Mr. Wexler, you have our full support. We're relieved you're alive. Good, Logan said simply. Because I plan to run things differently now. Brooklyn smiled to herself. Because this wasn't just about business. This was about ownership of his life, his body, his choices. This was about reclaiming every inch of what Derek tried to steal. Later that afternoon, he signed the reversal of temporary power of attorney, revoked Derek's shares, and restructured the leadership team. Legal had already prepped everything. All it took was one signature. He signed with hands that still trembled. But his signature was his again. And just like that, the company, and his life, belonged to Logan Wexler once more. That evening, as the city lights flickered on and skyscrapers lit up like constellations, Brooklyn and Logan stood on the terrace outside the Wexler penthouse. It had been silent for a while. The kind of silence that hums with peace. Logan leaned on the railing, wind tugging at his coat, the weight of everything he'd been through settling like dust after a storm. "I spent so long being angry," he finally said. "At Derek. At the doctors. At the world. And then I realized." Brooklyn turned to him, brows raised. "What?" "I was angry because I woke up and didn't recognize anything. Not the people. Not the building. Not even myself." She didn't speak. Just waited. "But there was one thing I did recognize," he added, his eyes meeting hers. "You." Brooklyn's chest tightened. "You were the first thing that made sense. The first thing that didn't feel like a lie or a trap. You didn't treat me like a brand or a victim. You just stayed." "I couldn't leave you," she said softly. "Everyone else did. I'm not everyone else." He reached for her hand. His grip was stronger now. So was his heart. "Brooklyn James," he said, voice thick, "you saved my life. Now I want to build one, with you in it." She swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "I thought I was just a nurse," she whispered. "You're not," he said. "You're the reason I came back." And in that moment, standing high above the city that once buried him, Logan Wexler didn't just reclaim his company. He reclaimed himself. His power. His future. His home, in her. The rooftop was quiet that night, just the way Logan planned it. No reporters. No shareholders. No speeches or champagne towers. Just him, Brooklyn, and the wide-open sky. The air was warm with the breath of early summer. Strings of fairy lights crisscrossed above, swaying gently in the breeze like fireflies caught mid-dance. The skyline of New York glittered in the distance, alive, pulsing, unapologetically loud, but up here, it felt like the world had been put on pause. Brooklyn stood near the edge, gazing out. She didn't know. She didn't know the ring was in his pocket. She didn't know what he had spent the last 2 weeks planning. She only knew the man she once bathed in silence, the man who'd been a ghost in a hospital bed, was now fully, impossibly here. Standing. Breathing. Loving. He took a step closer, clearing his throat. "Not as pretty as the ICU, but I thought you might like the view." She turned, smiling. "You brought me up here to compare rooftops and patient rooms?" "Kind of," he said, eyes twinkling. "But mostly for this." He reached into his jacket and dropped to one knee. Brooklyn's breath caught in her chest. Her hands flew to her lips. "Logan." He didn't rush. He didn't fumble. He looked straight up at her like she was gravity itself. "I don't remember the day we met. I don't remember the crash, or the machines, or the coma. But I remember your voice," he said softly. "I remember the sound of you laughing when you thought I was sleeping. I remember the warmth in your hands when you touched mine. And when I woke up, you were the first thing I recognized." Her eyes shimmered, tears already brimming. "You didn't just keep my body alive," he continued, voice trembling. "You kept my soul from slipping away. You held on when everyone else let go. You didn't need a reason. You just stayed." He pulled out the small black velvet box. Opened it. Inside, a simple, breathtaking diamond. Timeless. Elegant. Like her. "I don't want to spend another day wondering what I'd do without you," he whispered. "Brooklyn James, will you marry me?" Her hands shook. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yes," she breathed. Then louder, stronger, "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and when he stood, she launched into his arms, laughing and crying all at once. Their kiss wasn't showy. It wasn't posed. It was real. Deep. like an exhale that had waited months to be released. And beneath the hum of city lights and the rustle of rooftop ivy, Logan Wexler, the man who once had everything but felt nothing, finally felt everything. They married under the stars. Not in a cathedral. Not in a ballroom. In the gardens of the Wexler estate, where truth had been revealed and hearts had found their home. White roses lined the path. Candlelight flickered down the aisle. The guests were close friends, hospital staff, a few quiet faces who had witnessed the storm and stayed through the rebuilding. Brooklyn wore a dress that floated like mist. Her smile outshone the moon. Logan stood waiting at the altar in a black tailored suit, no longer just a CEO, no longer a mystery man in a coma, but a husband. When she reached him, he took her hand and whispered, "Still think I'm faking it?" She laughed, a tear slipping down her cheek. "If you are, it's one hell of a performance." The vows were short, but sacred. "I once had the world at my feet," Logan said, voice steady. "But I didn't understand what it meant to live, until I opened my eyes and saw you." Brooklyn's voice broke as she replied, "You were the most silent man I've ever loved. And somehow, I still heard you louder than anyone." Their kiss sealed it. Applause echoed through the garden. But the world fell away until it was just the two of them, hand in hand, forehead to forehead. And as the stars wheeled above them and the flowers swayed in gentle approval, Brooklyn knew. This wasn't the ending of a love story. It was the beginning of a life neither of them ever saw coming. A nurse. A billionaire. A miracle that rewrote them both. And under that starlit sky, they finally understood what it meant to come back to life.